Bruh. All right, welcome back to the dev channel, maxcodes. Today, I'm gonna show you how to integrate a custom pop-up view inside of any iOS app you're building. It's super simple, and I'm gonna be able to show you this all in one video. Now, you might be wondering what this application is, and this is just a little application I'm working on for a course I'm releasing next week, all right? I'm not gonna talk about that. I'm just gonna say it's in-app purchases if you're wondering, but let's go ahead and get started with the pop-up, okay? So we're gonna be building this pop-up. All right, it's gonna be similar to it. So what I want you to do is I want you to obviously create a new Xcode project. So let's go ahead and do that right now. What I'm gonna do is hit Command Shift New since I have Xcode open from that project, and I'm gonna choose single view app, and then I'm just gonna call this pop-up view. And let's just go ahead and place that wherever you want. And the next thing, and basically what we're gonna do with this view is we're going to use programmatic auto layout and then with NS layout constraint, and then we're gonna have it all animate within the class. And then it's only gonna take 2 lines of code, well 3 because we're gonna use a delegate maybe. So 2 to 3 lines of code just to use the class, okay? So creating the class and then adding it to the sub view would be 2 of those lines. And then setting a protocol would be the 3rd if we end up doing that. I don't think we need to do that though. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I am going to go into here and zoom into my code a bit. I'm gonna drag this over, and then I'm gonna drag this simulator over a bit. And let me just make room for my face that I'm recording. I don't know if that's gonna, it doesn't matter. I'll put it over this because we're just gonna use like the top of the screen anyway. All right, so we're good there. Let's go ahead and get rid of this comment and we're good to go. Now I wanna change this to iPhone XR, and then I'm just gonna change the background color to something like that cyan. I'm gonna recompile the app just to make sure everything's up and running. All right, so we should be good. That should kill that app and then boot up the new app. It's just taking a second. All right, come on, come on. I'll fast forward here. All right, we're good to go. So what we're gonna wanna do is get rid of the background color or change it to white. I just wanted to make sure it was working, and we're ready to start writing this class. So what I'm gonna do is create a new file, and I'm gonna call this popup.swift or whatever you wanna call it. You might consider putting your initials and then popup or maxcodes.io popup or something, since that's like the brand name here. I'm just gonna call it popup though. All right. And then I'm gonna import UIKit, and I'm gonna call this class popup and then Swift. Sorry, not, I don't know why I thought of that. That's really weird. What we're gonna do is make it a subclass of UIView. All right, next thing I'll do is initialize it, or I'll write an initializer so we can initialize it, the overridden one. And then I'm gonna super init that and type in frame. And if you've never done this, just follow along. You're gonna understand this as soon as you build out a few custom classes, which is what you'll do on this channel. So just make sure you subscribe and make sure you sub to the free newsletter in the link below, or just go to maxcodes.io to do that, because I'm going to show you how to do things like this, and you're going to get emails from me every couple weeks. I've only sent out one, and I started this like a couple months ago, so I'm definitely not going to spam you. I don't even email that much, but if you want to be updated with things that you can learn, maxcodes.io is where you're going to be able to sign up for that free newsletter. All right, so let's go ahead and write this. What I'm going to have you do is, we don't really care about putting a ton of labels on the screen like we have in the sketch file right here, because we really just want to deal with the pop-up. That's probably why you came here. Now, a couple of you probably want a few of these on here. So what I'll do is meet you in the middle, and I'll just add in a stack view with like 2 labels in it, and that should be good. All right, so what we're gonna do is we are going to go into here and write a couple labels, okay? So let's say file private, var or let, and I'll say title label is UI label, and we'll set that equal to that, and then we will write it in here. So we'll say let labels equal to UI label, return label, and then I'm just going to say label.translates auto resizing masking constraints is equal to false. That way we can use programmatic auto out really easily. Okay, so let's give it a font now. We'll say label.font is equal to UI font.system font of size, And I'll make this like, I think default it's 16, but I want to do this so I can put a bold font. So go ahead and do that. And then what we're going to do is we are going to give it some text. So let's say label.text is equal to title of pop-up or something, right? Like you can put whatever. Notification, like whatever you're going to put in your pop-up, right? Next thing I'll do is copy this, and then I will call this one subtitle label. And then we'll just do buy this item or something, in-app purchase. All right, cool. I'll say 1 credit, and then I'll just call this in-app purchase for 1 credit, for 1 book credit. There we go. That's pretty good. All right, so we have 2 of these labels. Let's go ahead and throw a stack on now, and we can just do this inside of the initializer, or you can do it outside of it. Honestly, what I would do in like a production application is just write it outside of it, because that's going to be a bit cleaner. So I'll say file private let stack is of type UI stack view. I don't know, I'm so out of breath. We'll say let stack is equal to UI stack view. And then this is the thing that's going to be a little bit interesting and maybe new to a couple of you. What you're going to want to do is choose this initializer with arrange subviews. Normally, if you even do this syntax in the first place, like with the equal sign and with the parentheses there, you might still do everything in here, but then you might add the subviews to a stack view down in here, right? Now, what you can do is you can put them straight in here, but you've probably tried that before. Maybe a few of you have, and you'll see that it doesn't work, right? If I say subtitle label and title label, it's not really going to work because the stack view here doesn't really know about these yet because none of them have been initialized or anything, right? So the developers of Swift have kind of safeguarded you from compiling this and having a break. So what we want to do is we want to say file private lazy let, and then what that's going to do is it's going to, we'll say lazy var because you can't use lazy on a constant. So we'll say lazy var, and then what's going to happen is it's going to basically run these 2 things before it runs this, and then the stack view in here will be able to view for the title and the subtitle label. It'll be in scope is one way you could put it, and you'll see that it compiles now. All right, so we're good there. Now what we want to do is we want to actually put this on the screen, maybe write a little bit more code so we can actually see it because we can't really see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that the self.background color is equal to .gray just so we can see it. And then what we want to do is we want to add some constraints straight in here so that we can actually see it. Or what we should do really is we should give it a frame for the entire background and then use constraints on the inside container view. Now that probably didn't make much sense, but let me explain, okay? I'll bring up Sketch here. You'll see that we have our pop-up, but then behind it we have this kind of like translucent kind of blur view. That blur view is the size of the screen. The pop-up is not the size of the screen. Now this pop-up class that we're writing is actually including this background here, which means the whole thing's is the pop-up, not just the little container pop-up view, if that makes sense. So what we'll do is we'll just use the screen bounds so that we can quickly get that background that size, and then we'll use constraints, programmatic constraints for the container view. So if that didn't make sense, just keep watching and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're just going to say, let's see, we're going to say self.frame is equal to UI screen.main.bounds. And let's just compile that. And it's not really going to do anything because we haven't yet used the pop-up class. So what we can do is we can go into viewcontroller.swift and we can initialize this pop-up here. We'll say let pop is equal to UI pop-up. Sorry, pop-up. This is a class we wrote, not one that UIKit has. And then we're just going to add it on the screen. So we'll say view.add subview pop. Now this is going to work automatically because the pop-up has declared its size, like its frame, its size and its origin within the class itself, which means whenever you use that class, it's going to be the size of the screen, which you might think is kind of a limitation, but it's actually exactly how we want it, right? There's no other time we're going to want the pop-up to not be the size of the screen, at least the background, right? So when I say we don't the pop-up the size of the screen, I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about, I can't click at that. I'm talking about the background. All right, so let's go ahead and let's add a few more things in, okay? So the first thing I want to add in is the container view. Okay. So what I'll do is we'll just add a view, right? I think this is how I did it in the course. We'll say file private let container is of type UIView. And then this is going to be very simple. We're just going to say that we can use auto layout constraints with it. So translates, come on. Oh, I haven't declared it yet. We'll say let v is equal to UIView. And I'll say v.translates auto resizing mask into constraints is equal to false. That's another thing is you've probably noticed by now, this within here doesn't have to be the same title as the variable we're kind of ultimately assigning it to. Okay, next thing we'll do is we will say v.background color is white and v.layer.corner radius. And we'll put something like 24. And then let me shift tab this back. I'm going to select it all and hold shift tab a couple times so that we can line it up all nice. And then I just tabbed it forward. Okay, that's good. Now we just have to return the V and we should be good to go. All right, now let's add this on and constrain it with programmatic auto layout or NS layout constraints, right? So that's pretty simple stuff. And a lot of you have probably done that before, but maybe some of you haven't. So I'll explain it briefly as I go through it, and then we'll get into the animations. All right, so let's go ahead and let's go down to here. And we want to put the container on, and then we want to put the stack inside of it, okay? So what we'll do is we will say self.content view. You want to add it to the content view. If we were in a cell, we're not. We're in a just normal UI view, so we can just add it. So we'll say self.add subview, and then we'll just say container, and then we'll say container dot, let's see, where did I put, I have it pulled up here. Where did I put in the course code? This is from the in-app purchase course, which again, you can check out. I haven't released it yet, so if you're watching this, maybe it's not there, but you can sign up to the newsletter and then you'll eventually get the email with the course if you're curious about that. But basically, you'll see in here, I'm using like hide anchors and all these things. We're going to be doing it all a bit different. We're not going to do it straight like I'm doing in here. This is a little bit more complex. We are going to be writing these animations in this video, however. And if you just want the code, that's in the description. All right, so what we'll do is we will use a height, width, and then we'll just center it. That seems right. All right, so let's do this. Let me pull that out. All right. And what we'll do is we'll say container.center yanchor dot constraint is equal to, and I'll just say self.center yanchor. Come on, dot is active. We just want to activate it straight up. And basically we're just activating constraints here. And what that center Y is going to do is center it in the Y axis. So if I change it to center X anchor, it's going to say a layout anchor representing the horizontal center of the view's frame. So if we constrain it to the center X, it will constrain it on the X axis. Now, if you try to use center X anchor here and center Y anchor here, it will crash because these are two different anchor types and it won't work because you can't really, you can't constrain something on the X axis to the Y axis. That doesn't make any sense. All right, so we're good there. Next thing we want to do is give it a width and height or we're not really going to see anything. And what I'll do is I'll comment that out and then show you what happens when we add them back in. I should have added those later on because you're going to see it's in the top. So we'll say container.width anchor dot constraint is equal to, and I'm going to choose this one with a multiplier. So what we can do is say self.width anchor. And then we can multiply it and say 0.7, I think is what I had in the other code. And then I will copy that. And then what we'll do is we will just change it to height anchor. So really basic stuff. And then we'll just make it 4.5 or something. I think that's what I put. All right, so we should be good. Now, if you try and add the subview after the anchors, it will crash. But if you do that, it won't crash. It has to be on the screen before you can do anything with constraints. All right, so we're good there. Let's go ahead and compile it and just see what we get. And then I'll uncomment these so that when I recompile it, you'll see it go to the center of the screen. All right. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. When I recompile it now, it's going to center back in because I uncommented those two lines. So pretty obvious, not obvious if you've never written this, but obvious now that you're seeing the code, right? Like center at Y and X, it's obvious it's going to center it. Okay. All right, and we have it centered on the screen. So we're almost done. Now what we need to do is just throw on these views here inside of our stack, and then we will put in the animations and then we'll be done. So a couple more minutes. So one thing I'm gonna do in the stack view here is say stack dot translates auto resizing mask and constraints is equal to false. And that will allow us to use programmatic auto layout. Now, for example, if for container, if we didn't put in this line right here, if I compiled that, it's not going to work because you need to set that to false in order to constrain things with programmatic auto layout. Otherwise, it's going to translate the auto resizing mask into constraints, and then you're going to be left with new constraints that you didn't really write. So basically what happened is these constraints ran and they were working, but then the auto resizing mask was translated into constraints and there was applied new constraints, which on the UI view is a set of nothing because there's no frame or anything. Okay, so I'll put that back in and it should be back. And now we're ready to add the stack view. Now you don't want to add the stack view just straight up on the screen. What we want to do is add it inside of the container. So what I'll do is I'll say container.add subview. And then I'll just throw in the stack there. And then now what we can do is pretty much a similar concept, right? We can do the very same thing. Or what we can do is we can constrain it to the top, left, right, and bottom anchors, which if you're new to auto layout or just want some more auto layout constraint experience is good to do in this video. So what I'll do is say stack.top_anchor.constraint is equal to, and I'll just say, let's see, container.top_anchor. Now, I didn't do this in the other code, in the code for the course, because it's a little more complex of a view. Like if I go back into the course code, in the course app where you learn how to do these in-app purchases, you'll see that you have this title, but then you have all this. And then the way I built the custom buttons, it basically wouldn't allow this top one to be in the stack view because that needs to be the same width, but then this needs to be a fixed 108 width, which you can't really have inside of a stack view. So the stack view in here is only that wide. Notice how all of these are within the width of the button basically, but then this extends. So I ended up having to write a little extra code to have that stick outside of the stack view. And what I'm saying by all this is that we aren't doing that in this video. We're making it a lot simpler. We are just doing a little stack view in here and putting everything in it. So we can easily just do this. Top anchor, top anchor, top anchor. And then I'll change this to leading anchor. Leading anchor. And then I'll copy that right there. And then I'll change this one to trailing anchor and trailing. So trailing is going to be the end, kind of like a trail. And then leading is going to be leading because it's like the beginning, right? The lead, right? And then this, you could think of that being as the leading though, if you think about it. And then I'll just say bottom anchor and then bottom anchor. And you can also not use leading. You can also use like left anchor and right anchors. But from what I see, it's a better practice to use leading and trailing, especially because they perform differently based on a few different things, but generally they're going to do the exact same thing. Like, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think in countries where the languages are read backwards, I think that leading and trailing are actually swapped. So like if this was in a different country, it would be on the right and then trailing would be on the left, if that makes sense. I'm not sure though. Drop a comment and let me know if that's not right. But if you do left anchor and right anchor, it's going to be the same worldwide because left and right. All right, so we're good there. Let's go ahead and compile our app and just see if it works. I'm not sure if it will, but it should because we have the stack view here and we've thrown in the sub views. It should just work. And this is what I love about auto layout. It's actually really simple. It seems kind of complex, but notice how we haven't had to use any storyboards. Really awesome. Now you'll see it's kind of jacked up. First, I want to change some of the spelling. It looks like, okay, so it said 1 credit and then there's no space after that, so it's combining it. But then I spelled purchase wrong as well. All right, regardless, what we need to do is put it on a different axis. So that's where more stack view attributes come in. We can say stack dot, and then axis is equal to dot vertical instead of horizontal. Then what's going to happen is it's going to put the views on top of each other. All right, So let's go ahead and compile that. Dang, I think there's coffee in my hair from the beginning of this video. When it splashed out. I don't know if I'm going to put that in, but anyway, you'll see it's working a little bit better now. Now, one thing you might want to do is make it smaller, make the text a bit bigger. So we can say like, okay, we want this to be 28 and we want this to be 24, the font size. And then we also want to center that. So we'll say label.text alignment. I think it's text alignment. I've been doing a lot of CSS, so it's text align in CSS. But if we do that, it's going to center it. And then what we want to do is make it kind of smaller, right? So one thing you might want to do is get rid of these constraints, or you can add constants to those. So you can get rid of those, and then you can give it a fixed width, kind of like what we're doing in here. So I can copy that, and then I can paste it here, or you can just write it out, this anchor right here, and then I can make it 0.5, and then I can change the self to self.container, or just container.width anchor. And I meant to say height anchor, my bad. Change that to height anchor, and then we should be good. And then change that to stack. Okay, now if that was really confusing, let me explain. So what we're doing is we're taking the stack, and then we're saying, okay, we want to change we want to like modify its height anchor, right? And then what we're going to do is set that equal to the container's height anchor times 0.5. So about half the height of the container, which will leave it pretty good. Now the problem with this is it's probably going to be stuck at the top or the bottom, because we haven't really specified the top or bottom anchors at this point. All we've said is, okay, we want the leading and trailing, so we know it's going to be the width, and then we want it to be half the height. So it's probably going to be stuck at the top. That's what I expect. All right, you'll see it's at the top. So we can fix that pretty quickly by just saying center Y anchor now, right? We can copy this one, and we can paste it somewhere in here. And we can say stack.center Y anchor. And you can say self.center Y anchor, or you can just say container.self.center Y anchor. I would do container, because if you don't do container, if you do self, if you end up wanting to change these constraints, and not have it be directly centered in the view, this will no longer be centered. The stack will no longer be centered in the container. It's still going to be centered inside of the self, right? The class, the pop-up instance. So it's good to contain it to the view you actually want it to be in. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to say label dot number of lines is equal to, let's say 3. I think we're only going to be using 2. And then I'll change the font to 20 or even 18. And then I'll recompile that. And then let's just go ahead and wait for that to boot up. And then we should see what that looks like. And then one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to click on the debugger, and I wanted to look a little bit more into the views, but since this is taking so long, I think we should just skip over that. And if you're curious, hit that little debugger button and you can look at the views, maybe change the background colors a bit and see exactly what's going on. And then I also recommend playing around with the stack attributes, because you're going to see more how that works. But regardless, we have it on the screen. We pretty much have what we want. Let's go ahead and talk about animations. Okay. So first thing we want to do is dismiss it, right? And we want to dismiss it whenever we tap outside of the pop-up. So anywhere on this gray. So first thing I'm going to do is change the background color to UIColor.gray.with alpha component. You probably weren't expecting that. But what I'm doing is just making a little bit see-through so that it's not so gray. And then that will just make it see-through. Now the next thing we want to do is write a function in which we can dismiss this, okay? And that's where our animations come in. So what we're going to do is we're going to say add Objective-C, file private func, and I'm going to say animate out. And then what I'm going to do is just type in a UIView animation. Just a very basic one. I recommend using a spring animation just to make it look a little bit better. I'll change that at the end of this video. We'll use a spring animation. It makes it come in a lot better and leave a bit better. All right, so what we want to do is we just want to throw it off the screen with a transform. I'm also making an animations course. Totally forgot about that. Haven't started recording it yet, but I have it all planned out. It took me a couple days. So self.container.transform is equal to cg find transform. And then I'm just going to choose the translation one. And I'm going to say 0 on the x-axis. And then for y, I'm just going to have it go up. So I'll say self.frame.height. And then what we'll do, I think we're good there. Yeah, and then we want to change the alpha, but we'll do that in a second. Let's go ahead and make it so whenever we tap it, it will animate out. So what I'm going to do is say self in the initializer here, add gesture recognizer is of type UI tap gesture recognizer. And then if we choose target, we want to say self. And then for selector, we just want to say selector and then say self.animate out, or just get rid of self. You can just say animate out. Either way. I think at this point, you probably understand how self works. If you don't, drop a comment, let me know, shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'll explain it out in a video, or just I'll message you if you ask me on social media or something. All right, let's compile that. Looks like we got an error somewhere. Not sure why. I think it's just because I killed it at a certain point in compilation and it junked it up. I really hope the audio is recording. Sometimes it doesn't record and then I have to end up re-recording the entire video. Okay, let's tap this. You'll see it animates out really nice. Now what I want to do is I want to use a spring animation. So I'll say UIView.spring, and that's not how the method works, but it's going to give us the right method immediately right there. Hit return on that, and you got all these options. Duration, 0.3, delay, 0, spring with damping, just say 0.7. If you go, and then I'll explain that because I accidentally tabbed, but what we'll do is we'll say initial spring velocity 1, and then animation options, we'll just say curve, ease in. I always just use curve, ease in. I honestly never see the difference between these whenever I use them, although there is a small difference, I'm sure. Hit return on animations, and then what we're gonna do is hit tab for completion and get rid of the completion. Well, what we'll do is we'll hit return on the completion and then we'll say complete here. And then I'll leave it right there because once we are complete, we actually want to dismiss the view. So what we want to do is say if complete self dot, and we'll say dismiss because that's a view. I guess it's not because it's a UI view, not a, oh yeah, duh. Self.remove from super view. I bet a ton of you already got that. Self.remove from super view. So unlinks the view from its super view and its window and removes it from the responder chain. So when the animation is complete, we actually want to remove it, right? So what we'll do here is we will cut this self-container transform out, put it back in there, and then get rid of that animation. And then now when we compile it, it's going to animate out with a little bit of spring. And you're not going to see it a ton on the animate out, but when we animate it in, you're going to see the spring a bit more because it's going to bounce in. Now, if you use a value, you want to look at the spring with damping value on a scale of 0 to 1, right? So 0.1 is going to be really bouncy and 1 is going to be not bouncy at all. So I'm just going to say I want it to be a bit bouncy, so 0.7. Tap it, you'll see it animates out. Now, that was a bit quick, so I'm going to change the duration to 0.5. And you'll see that the gray is gone because it actually removed it from the super view. So let's compile that. And one thing I want to kind of animate out with it is not just the transform, but also the opacity or the alpha. So we can simply do this by just adding into here one more line by saying self.alpha is equal to 0. What that's going to do is animate the opacity or the visibility out to 0. All right, so let's go ahead and, ooh, we just got a wedding invite from Neil Myers. I'll let you know you're in this video, dog. All right, so let's go ahead and recompile that because I got confused by that. I got thrown off by that text. Thanks for the wedding invite, bro. All right, so I think that was a wedding invite. I just saw it in the notifications. It looked like a wedding invite. All right, I'm gonna tap that and bam, it animates out. Looks really nice. Now we wanna animate it in as well. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy this entire function. Now, if you're really trying to go all in, what I would do, or what I would advise you to do, is try and make these into one function. That's going to be a challenge though, and you're probably going to end up having two functions calling that one function. It's just, it seems a little unnecessary to have two UIView animates. That's all I'm going for. All right. So what we're going to do is when we animate it in, we actually want it to come from the top. So we'll cut that out and put it right before it. And then in here, we're just going to say self.container.identity. Sorry, self.container.transform is equal to .identity. What that's going to do is bring it back to its initial state. And then the alpha, we want it to be 1. And then up here, we'll just say self.alpha is equal to 0. All right. And then we don't want to remove it from the super view when it's complete. So we'll just get rid of that. We want it to stay because it's animating in. Now, how do we get it to animate in? Well, normally what you do is you'd want to click a button inside of your app like you see in this app right here, right? You want to hit this button and have it come in. Now, just because I don't want to make this video any much longer than it has to be, what we're going to do is we're just going to go into viewcontroller.swift. And what I'll do is I'll cut this out using Command X, and then I'll create a delay. So I'll say dispatch main. Well, I guess what we could do is say perform, and then perform a selector. But I want to show you dispatch. So we'll say dispatch queue.main.async after deadline, and I'll just say dispatch time dot now. And if you don't know what this is, search on my channel for a video, because I have a couple videos on dispatch queue. And I'll just say after 1 second, we will run this code. And I'll paste it back in. And then I'll say self.view. Okay, so now when we compile it, after about a second, it should animate in. But it's not going to, because we've never really called the animate in function within our pop-up class. So what we need to do is go inside of our initializer, get rid of these two comments here. And then at the bottom, I'm going to call that method. So after we've constrained everything, I'm going to animate it in. So I'll say animate in, and that should work. Now, one thing I'm kind of questioning is it might not work entirely how we want it, because we're setting these things after we've constrained it all, but I think it should work. Let's go ahead and wait a second after we compile it. All right, so it didn't go in the way we wanted it to, and it's not because of these two lines, right? Now I thought it might be, but the reason is because if we go into viewcontroller.swift, we initialize it right here, and then we wait a second and throw it in. So those animations actually occur. So there's two things you could do. You can either add a delay to this of 1, which I wouldn't do, because what if you declare it and then add it in at a different time, right? You want to initialize it right when you're about to add it. So what we'll do is we will not add in the delay of 1, although that would work for this very specific case, but as soon as you change this to 2 seconds, it's not going to work. So what we'll do is we'll take the pop-up here in viewcontroller.swift, paste it into our dispatch queue completion, and we'll recompile it. And then now when you load up the app after a second, it's going to pop up in after a second, and it's going to look really nice. Okay. And that's how it works. That's how you do a custom pop-up view in Swift and Xcode. If you liked the video, drop a like and subscribe, and make sure to subscribe to the free newsletter in the link below, because I give out content there, free coupons every now and then to my courses. And if you want to check out my courses, those are all on maxcodes.io/courses as well. All right, so that's it for this video, and I'll see you next time.